Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a book that's kind of like the holy grail of leadership advice. John C. Maxwell's The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. Have you had a chance to dig into this one yet?
Oh, absolutely. It's a classic for a reason, right? I mean, Maxwell doesn't just throw theories at you. He breaks down these leadership laws with stories and real-world examples. It really gets you thinking.
I totally agree. And today we're going beyond just like skimming the surface. We're diving into those actionable insights that you can actually use, whether you're, leading a team at work, or maybe you're heading up some volunteer project, or even just trying to navigate like family stuff.
Yeah, because here's the thing. These laws, they aren't just for CEOs or like world leaders. These are principles that can help anyone increase their influence and really have a bigger impact,
Right. So let's start with one of the most well-known laws, the law of the lid. Maxwell uses a fascinating example to illustrate this one. The McDonald brothers. The guys who actually came up with the original McDonald's concept. They had a brilliant idea, right?
Yeah.
Fast and affordable food. Standardized menus, pure genius.
Absolutely. But here's where the law of the lid comes in. Maxwell's point is that your ability to lead is like a lid on your effectiveness. So the McDonald brothers, as innovative as they were, they kind of had a leadership lid that prevented them from taking their business to the next level.
Like they hit a wall. And then that's where Ray Kroc comes into the picture, right? He may not have invented the Big Mac, but boy, did he have the leadership chops that the McDonald brothers were missing.
Yeah, and those skills, those were the things that transformed McDonald's into, McDonald's, that global phenomenon. Kroc was a master of systematization and franchising and just creating a really consistent brand experience.
So I'm curious, for our listeners out there, think about a time when maybe you hit your own lid. Was it a project that just seemed to stall out? Maybe a team that lacked direction? Or was it some personal goal that you just couldn't seem to reach? I think understanding your own leadership strengths, but also those weaknesses, is so important if you want to break through those barriers, you know what I mean?
Totally. And, it's interesting because this idea of consistent growth kind of leads us to the next law, the law of process. And Maxwell uses this amazing story of Ann Schreiber, who was an IRS auditor, of all things, totally ordinary life, but she ended up amassing a $22 million fortune by the time she passed away.
Wow. And she wasn't born into wealth or anything, right?
No, not at all. She built that fortune through decades of really disciplined investing, just slow and steady.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's a fantastic illustration of how small, consistent actions, when you do them over time, can lead to such remarkable results. It wasn't about hitting the jackpot or anything like that. It was about steady growth and that commitment to sticking with the process.
This law is so important, especially for leadership, because it reminds us that becoming a good leader isn't something that happens overnight, right? It's a process of constantly learning, of honing those skills, and just embracing the fact that growth is a journey.
It really is. And just like Ann Schreiber, right, she didn't become a master investor overnight. And in the same way, great leaders, they aren't born, they're made. Through putting in the effort consistently and being willing to learn from those setbacks and the successes, of course.
And these first two laws really highlight something that we see again and again throughout Maxwell's book. Leadership isn't about some magical inborn talent. It's a skill. It's a craft. It's something that you work at, you cultivate through dedication and a commitment to your own personal growth.
Absolutely, yeah. And actually, Maxwell goes on to outline these different phases of leadership growth from those early days where you kind of feel like you're just faking it till you make it.
Oh, we've all been there.
All the way to eventually becoming that person that others seek out for advice and mentoring. It's really a journey of constant evolution.
So speaking of leveling up, let's talk about a few specific qualities that Maxwell highlights as being absolutely crucial for effective leadership. Things like knowledge, intuition, courage, loyalty. And I know on the surface, these might seem like common sense.
Yeah.
But he really brings them to life with these powerful stories and examples.
Right. And he doesn't just list them out, right? Let's take knowledge and intuition. He talks about General Norman Schwarzkopf, who, I don't know if you remember, he took command of what was basically considered the worst battalion in Vietnam during the war.
Right.
And it was really considered the worst. But through this combination of strategic thinking, like really understanding his soldiers, and just having that ability to make really tough decisions with very little information, he actually managed to turn this entire unit around.
Wow.
It's a perfect example of how knowledge isn't just about what you know on paper, it's about how you apply it, especially when you're under pressure. And Schwarzkopf's intuition, which, let's face it, he developed through years of experience, it allowed him to read situations really accurately and make those split-second decisions that made all the difference.
And then you have someone like Harriet Tubman. Talk about someone who embodies courage. This is a woman who literally put her life on the line, constantly, for what she believed in. Leading enslaved people to freedom on the Underground Railroad. I mean, that's leadership in action.
It really is. Her story, it just shows you that courage isn't about not feeling fear. It's about taking action even when you're afraid, especially when something is important enough. And Tubman's courage, it was contagious. It inspired those around her to risk everything for a chance at freedom.
And for loyalty, Maxwell uses the relationship between Dean Smith, the legendary basketball coach, and Michael Jordan. I mean, Jordan himself has said that Coach Smith didn't just help him develop his skills on the court. He really instilled in him the discipline and that incredible work ethic that led to his phenomenal success.
Yeah, and what's really interesting about that is that Smith's leadership style, it wasn't about being the loudest voice in the room or, demanding respect. It was about genuinely caring for his players, setting high standards, and building a culture of loyalty within that team.
That's so important. When you really think about these qualities, knowledge, intuition, courage, loyalty, they're not about being the loudest person in the room or even having all the answers.
Right.
They're about being able to understand people, connect with them on a human level, build trust, and inspire the people around you to strive for something bigger than themselves.
Absolutely. It's about bringing out the best in each other.
And, it's funny because we often think of leadership as this like big, untouchable thing, but Maxwell really brings it down to earth and shows us that it's not about having some fancy title. It's really about those small, everyday interactions and the choices we make, even when we don't realize we're leading.
Oh, yeah, totally. Like even just setting a good example, right?
Exactly.
That's leadership.
It really is.
And speaking of those everyday choices, there's this idea of trust, which Maxwell calls the law of solid ground. And it basically emphasizes just how crucial trust is in leadership.
Oh, it's everything, right? Like a foundation. It's what allows teams to really function well, for projects to succeed, and like you said, even just for relationships to thrive.
Exactly. Trust is the foundation, because without it, you're always fighting an uphill battle. You're dealing with suspicion, with doubt, and you just don't have that same level of commitment. And, Maxwell breaks it down into these three core components: competence, connection, and character.
Okay, so let's break those down a bit. Competence seems pretty straightforward, right? You got to know your stuff. You got to be good at what you do.
Yeah, for sure. But it goes deeper than just, having the knowledge or the skills, right? It's about actually demonstrating those things consistently. Your team has to trust that you actually know what you're doing and that you have the ability to guide them in the right direction.
Right. And connection, we touched on this earlier, but it's so important. People need to feel like they're actually seen and heard by their leaders and that they're valued. And it goes back to building those real, genuine relationships, not just like bossing people around.
For sure. And, this ties in directly with character. Like your integrity, your honesty, and that willingness to do what's right, even when it's tough. Those are the things that inspire real trust and loyalty.
It's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Exactly. And Maxwell doesn't shy away from showing just how damaging it can be when trust erodes. He talks about things like the Vietnam War and the Watergate scandal, where that lack of transparency from leaders, that lack of accountability, it just led to this huge sense of cynicism and this disillusionment among people.
Right. It's almost like a betrayal in a way.
Exactly. Yeah.
And once that trust is gone, it's so hard to rebuild.
Oh, it's incredibly difficult.
So moving on to another aspect of leadership that I find so fascinating.
Yeah.
The law of respect.
Yeah.
And this law basically says that people are naturally drawn to follow leaders who are stronger than themselves. And I don't mean physically stronger.
Right. No, not at all.
So what does that actually look like then?
It's about strength of character, having strong convictions, and competence plays a role too. And a great example that Maxwell uses is, again, Harriet Tubman. Here's a woman who faced just unbelievable adversity. But she rose to become such a powerful leader because people saw her incredible inner strength, that unwavering courage, and that deep commitment to her cause.
Yeah.
It's really amazing.
She just led by example, and she proved her strength through her actions, and people just naturally wanted to follow her.
Yeah, she didn't demand respect, she earned it.
Yeah.
And it's a great reminder for all of us, I think. True leadership isn't about demanding respect. It's about earning it through your actions, through your character, through who you are.
And sometimes earning respect means having to make those really tough decisions, even when you don't have all the information. And that's where the law of intuition comes in. And this is something that I think a lot of people struggle with, trusting their gut.
Yeah, it can be scary, but so important.
It can be. So how would you explain that? Like when you talk about intuition, are you talking about that feeling you get, that inner voice telling you what the best course of action is, even if you don't necessarily have all the data in front of you to back it up?
Exactly. It's like, it's not just about blindly trusting some random feeling. True intuition, it's developed through years of experience, through self-awareness, and having a deep understanding of the people that you're leading. You have to kind of be able to read between the lines.
Oh, I like that. It's like you're reading the situation.
Exactly.
It's not just about what people are saying, it's also what they're not saying. It's about those nonverbal cues.
Totally.
And you have to be able to read yourself too.
Absolutely. Being self-aware is key. Know your strengths, know your weaknesses, know your blind spots.
Okay, so we've talked about the importance of trust, respect, intuition. Now let's dive into something that I think is so intriguing, the law of magnetism. And this one states that who you are is who you attract.
Oh, I love this one. This is huge because it really makes you think about the people you choose to surround yourself with, doesn't it?
It does, because if you're constantly surrounded by negativity or drama or just like complacency, it might be a sign that you need to take a good hard look at your own leadership style.
Right. Absolutely. It's a reflection of you in a way. And a good leader, they understand that and they use it to their advantage. They surround themselves with people who challenge them, who inspire them. And Maxwell, he actually uses an example from his own life. He talks about when he became the leader of Skyline Church, he noticed that the people who started coming to the church, they were a little bit different than the folks who were there under the previous leader, who happened to be a musician.
Interesting.
Yeah, so under the musician, there were a lot of musicians, but with Maxwell at the helm, they started to see a different crowd.
So what kind of people were you attracting under your leadership?
It was interesting. We saw a lot of emerging leaders, individuals who were really passionate about personal growth and making a real difference in the world. It just goes to show that a leader's values, their priorities, and let's be honest, their personality, it all shapes the culture of an organization.
Absolutely.
And it influences the kind of people it attracts.
That's such a powerful insight.
Yeah.
It means as leaders, we have to be so mindful of our own behavior, of the environment that we're creating, because it directly impacts the people we attract and ultimately, our success.
100%, yeah. And this ties back into the law of connection, which I know we've talked about, but it's just so fundamental.
Can't talk about it enough.
I know, right? Maxwell's point is that genuine connection, it's the lifeblood of effective leadership.
So true.
And he uses that really poignant example of Hurricane Katrina and just the disconnect that was so evident between the leaders and the people who were suffering in New Orleans during that crisis. It was heartbreaking and just a really stark reminder of how damaging a lack of genuine empathy and connection can be, especially in a crisis.
Right.
And then he contrasts that with this really heartwarming story about Ronald Reagan and how his staff, whenever he would return from a trip, they would say, "Daddy's home."
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it just wasn't about this power dynamic or anything like that. It was about Reagan's ability to really connect with people, make them feel seen and valued.
I love that.
Yeah, it's special.
And I think it shows that true connection. It's not about these grand gestures or some sort of forced camaraderie. It's really about those small, everyday interactions where you just show up authentically and you show genuine care and empathy. It's about meeting people where they are.
Yes, 100%. And that leads us so well into this idea of buy-in, which Maxwell calls the law of buy-in. And his point is that people buy into the leader before they ever buy into the vision.
It's so true. It's like that saying, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Oh, that's good. I'm going to write that one down.
Right. I mean, you can have the most brilliant idea in the world, the most incredible vision, but if your team doesn't trust you, if they don't respect you, they're not going to be on board.
Absolutely not. They have to believe in you first. And, Maxwell uses the example of Gandhi, who, let's be honest, not only had this incredibly compelling vision for India's independence, but he also had this incredible charisma, this integrity that just drew people to him. They believed in Gandhi, the person first, and then they believed in his vision.
It's so powerful. And it really speaks to the importance of building that foundation first, that foundation of trust, of demonstrating your competence, and connecting with people on a human level.
Absolutely. Without that foundation, even the best ideas, the most brilliant visions, they're not going to get very far.
And speaking of achieving those big, ambitious goals, that takes us to the law of victory, which is all about having that relentless pursuit of success, that refusal to accept defeat. True leaders find a way.
Yes. It's about having that unwavering belief, believing that anything is possible when you have that clear vision, when you have a team that's united and everyone's really committed to excellence.
And I love the example Maxwell uses for this one. He talks about Winston Churchill during World War II, no less. Talk about a time when leadership really mattered.
Oh my gosh, absolutely.
And Churchill's leadership during that time was just incredible. The way he rallied the British people, the way he lifted their spirits, and ultimately led them to victory. And he did it by surrounding himself with, this really diverse, talented team. He fostered a sense of unity, and he just demanded excellence.
He was relentless. And, it reminds us that true leaders, they don't just stumble upon victory, they create it through strategic planning, through determination, and a deep, deep belief in the power of their team.
So well said. And once you've achieved those initial victories, it's about harnessing that momentum. That brings us to the law of the big mo.
Oh, momentum is huge. It's like that magical force that makes everything seem possible, right?
It really is. When you have momentum, obstacles seem smaller, and it just feels like you can achieve anything.
Totally. It's a game changer.
And Maxwell says it's like a leader's best friend. But he's also quick to point out that momentum can be fragile.
It can. You can't take it for granted. It takes effort to keep that energy going. And that's where a good leader comes in. They know how to guide it, how to sustain it.
It's not about resting on your laurels. It's about using those wins to propel you forward, to fuel even greater accomplishments.
Yes. And a good leader knows that it takes constant nurturing.
So important for leaders to remember that. You can't just expect momentum to magically appear and stay there. It takes intentional action. You have to pay attention to your team's energy and then be able to steer that energy in the right direction.
It's like you're a conductor,
Yeah.
You're orchestrating this beautiful symphony of energy and effort.
I love that analogy. And speaking of steering things in the right direction, that brings us to a law that I think is so relevant in today's world, the law of priorities.
Oh, yeah. With all the distractions and demands on our time, this one is huge.
It really is. I mean, we're constantly bombarded with things vying for our attention. It's about cutting through all that noise and focusing on what really matters.
Absolutely. Because you know what? Being busy does not equal being productive. You can be running around like a chicken with its head cut off all day long, but if you're not focused on the right things, you're not going to make any real progress.
It's so true. It's about working smarter, not just harder.
Exactly. And, Maxwell actually tells this funny story about how he realized that he was spending an insane amount of time traveling for work.
Really?
Oh, yeah, like an absurd amount of time.
Wow.
And it was just like this light bulb moment for him. He realized that he was wasting so much precious time and energy that he could be using on other things, on his priorities. So he made the strategic decision to move his family to a more central location, and it freed up so much of his time and energy, and he was able to be much more present.
That's amazing. What a great example of how even small shifts in our priorities can make such a difference in our productivity and just our overall well-being. Really.
It's incredible. And, it's about being intentional with our time.
The 80-20 rule, right?
Exactly. 80% of our results come from just 20% of our efforts. So the question is, what's that crucial 20% for you?
It's about being really honest with yourself about where you're spending your time and your energy. It's asking yourself, is this task really going to move the needle, or am I just spinning my wheels?
Yes. It's about focusing on those high-impact activities, the ones that are really going to make a difference.
So powerful.
Yeah.
And, achieving those high-impact results, it often requires sacrifice.
It does, which leads us to the law of sacrifice, which, let's be honest, can be a tough one.
It can. It's not always easy to hear.
It's not, but it's real. Reaching the next level, achieving something truly great, it usually means giving up something in return. It's about being willing to put the needs of your team, of your organization, maybe even your cause, ahead of your own wants and desires sometimes.
It's about the bigger picture.
Yes, and Maxwell talks about Martin Luther King Jr., a man who literally dedicated his entire life to fighting for civil rights, knowing full well that there were huge risks, huge sacrifices involved.
Right, his life was constantly being threatened.
Exactly. But his commitment to justice, even in the face of all that danger and adversity, that's the law of sacrifice in action.
It's so humbling when you really think about it. It's a good reminder that true leadership isn't about what you can get out of it, It's not about seeking personal gain or comfort.
It's about serving others. It's about making a difference in the world.
And sometimes those difficult choices, those sacrifices, they involve navigating tricky situations and understanding that timing is everything.
Oh yeah, timing can make or break you, which is why Maxwell talks about the law of timing.
And this one seems so intuitive, right? We all know that a fantastic idea presented at the wrong time can be just as ineffective as a bad idea at the right time. But Maxwell actually gives us a framework for understanding this whole concept of timing and leadership.
He does. It's really interesting. And, he uses the example of Robert E. Lee, who is known for being this brilliant military strategist. But during the Battle of Gettysburg, he made a really critical error in judgment when he ordered this massive, costly charge at a time when his troops were already exhausted and demoralized.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it just highlights how even the most capable leaders can make mistakes when they misjudge the timing of their actions.
So how can leaders get better at understanding timing? Like, what are some things that they should be considering?
Well, Maxwell talks about 4 key factors: maturity level, momentum, morale, and resources. Leaders need to be able to look at their team and assess if they're ready for whatever change is being proposed. They need to consider the level of momentum that's already driving their efforts. How's the overall mood of the team? Are they feeling confident? And of course, do you have the resources in place to support what you're trying to do?
It's like reading the room, but on a whole other level. It's about understanding the subtleties of the situation, the dynamics, and then making decisions that align with the current reality, even if it means that you have to adjust your plan or maybe delay things a bit.
Right. It's about being flexible and adaptable. And sometimes it's about knowing when to step back and let others take the lead.
Which takes us to the law of explosive growth, right?
Yes. This one's all about scaling your impact by developing other leaders. It's about recognizing that you can't do it all alone and that the best way to multiply your impact is to actually invest in the growth of others.
That's so true. And Maxwell, he actually lays out these 3 stages of leadership development. Do you remember what those are?
Yeah. It starts with developing yourself. You've got to work on yourself first. And then it's about developing your team, building a really strong and capable team. And finally, it culminates in developing leaders, identifying those emerging leaders within your sphere of influence and helping them to grow.
It's about making that shift from me to we. It's about recognizing that your legacy as a leader isn't just about what you accomplish. It's about the success and the leadership of those that you empower along the way.
It's about paying it forward and creating a legacy of leadership that's much bigger than just yourself.
Absolutely. And speaking of legacy, the law of legacy reminds us that the true measure of a leader is what happens after they're gone.
That's a powerful thought, isn't it?
It is. It makes you stop and think, what do I want to be remembered for?
Yeah.
Like, what impact do I really want to leave on the world? And, what's going to happen to the people that I lead, the organizations that I'm a part of when I'm not around anymore?
It's about making your mark, but not in an egotistical way. It's about leaving things better than you found them. And Maxwell, he uses this really inspiring story of Mother Teresa and the incredible, enduring legacy of the work that she did with the missionaries of charity.
Amazing.
And it's still going strong today.
That's so inspiring. I mean, her commitment to serving the poorest of the poor, it really transcended her lifetime.
It did. And her organization, it continues to make a difference all over the world. It's just beautiful. And it's a perfect illustration of how powerful one person's leadership can be, that one person can create this ripple effect that extends far beyond their own time.
It's incredible. It's like planting a seed that continues to grow and blossom even after you're gone.
I love that.
It really makes you think about the impact we're having, doesn't it? Not just today, but like years down the road.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of leads us to this next law that I find so fascinating, the law of the inner circle. And it really emphasizes the point that as leaders, our potential isn't just about our own individual abilities. It's also about the people we surround ourselves with.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. You know, it's like that old saying, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Right.
And it's so true, because the people we allow into our inner circle, they have this incredible power to shape our thinking, our beliefs, even our actions. And, you know, Maxwell talks about the importance of surrounding yourself with lifters, people who inspire you, who support your growth, and, you know, those people who aren't afraid to give you a little tough love when you need it.
Oh, those people are invaluable. To have someone who's willing to tell you the truth, even when it's hard to hear, it's so important.
It is, because let's be honest, none of us can see our blind spots, right?
Oh,
So we need those trusted advisors, those people in our corner who can say, hey, you know, you might want to rethink that.
Exactly. And Maxwell actually gives us these really practical questions that we can ask ourselves to kind of evaluate our inner circle.
Yeah.
And I love this framework. So I'm curious, do you remember what those questions are?
I think so, yeah. He talks about asking yourself, like, do these people, do they have influence with others? Are they actually adding value to what I'm doing? Do they have strong character? Are they bringing something unique to the table, something that maybe I'm missing?
Right, like a different perspective or a skill set.
Exactly, yeah. And then the last one, and I think this one is huge, is are they truly loyal to you, but also to the bigger vision, to what you're trying to build?
That's so key. And it makes you realize that building a strong inner circle, it's not just about surrounding yourself with yes people. It's about finding those folks who will challenge you, who will push you to be your absolute best, but who also have your back no matter what.
Totally. Because let's face it, leadership can be lonely.
It can be.
So having that solid inner circle, that's invaluable. It's everything.
And once you have that strong team around you, it's about being willing to let go of the reins a little bit, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. That's where the law of empowerment comes in.
Right. Which is all about trusting your team to step up and make decisions without you having to micromanage every little thing.
Exactly. Because when you empower your team, you're not just giving them tasks, you're giving them ownership. And that's when the real magic happens.
It's so true. And Maxwell tells this story about one of his mentees who, after years of guidance and support, eventually rose to a leadership position himself and started teaching others about, wait for it, empowerment.
Oh, I love it.
It's like this beautiful full circle moment.
It really is. And it just shows you that empowering others, it's not about losing control. It's about multiplying their impact.
100%. It's about creating this ripple effect of leadership that extends far beyond what you could ever achieve on your own.
And speaking of that, the next law, the law of the picture, it reminds us that as leaders, people are always watching us.
Oh, they are. They're like little sponges soaking it all in.
All the time. So we have to be mindful of the example we're setting because, let's be honest, actions speak louder than words, right?
Oh, absolutely. You can talk about integrity and hard work and all of that, but if you're not living it out, people can see right through it.
Totally. And Maxwell, he uses this really interesting comparison between two leaders from World War II, from that famous unit, the Band of Brothers. Have you heard of them?
Oh, yeah.
So he talks about Dick Winters, who was known for being this incredibly courageous leader, super competent, and he led from the front lines.
Wow. So he wasn't just standing back and giving orders.
No, not at all. He was right there in the thick of it with his men, and that earned him so much respect. And then he contrasts Winters with this other leader from the same unit, a guy named Sobel, who was all talk, no action. He was really big on rules and regulations, but when it came down to it, he just didn't have the heart, that true courage to really inspire his men.
That's such a stark contrast, and it makes you realize how important it is to not just talk the talk, but to walk the walk as well, to be that example.
It's everything. Because people, they can spot a fake a mile away, right?
They can. And this is a good reminder for leaders at all levels. It doesn't matter if you're leading a small team or you're the CEO of a huge corporation. People are always watching, always taking cues from how you're showing up.
That's true. And speaking of showing up, the law of navigation, I love this one. It basically says that anyone can steer the ship, but it takes a true leader to actually chart the course.
That's so good. It's about having that vision, that ability to see where you're going and then actually figure out how to get there.
Exactly. It's like, imagine you're a sea captain, right? You need to know how to maneuver that ship, for sure. But you also need to know where you're going and how to navigate all those obstacles and storms along the way.
That's a great analogy. And I love how Maxwell emphasizes that it's not just about like the leader going off into a room by themselves and coming up with this grand plan in isolation. The best leaders, they actually involve their teams in the navigation process, right?
Oh, 100%, yeah. It's about communicating the vision clearly, making sure everyone's on the same page, and getting input from everyone, from all levels of the organization.
It's about creating that shared ownership, that sense of, like, we're all in this together. Let's figure this out.
Exactly. And that brings us to another law that's near and dear to my heart, the law of addition. It's the idea that true leadership isn't about, like, what you can get from people. It's about what you can add to their lives.
Oh, I love that. It's about giving, not just taking.
Exactly. And, Maxwell, he talks about Jim Sinegal, who's the co-founder of Costco, and he was famous for always putting his employees first. Always. Like, fair wages, creating a really positive work environment.
He really valued his employees.
He did. He treated everyone with respect.
Yep.
And here's the thing. He knew that by taking care of his employees, he was also taking care of his business.
It makes sense, right? Happy employees, happy customers.
Exactly. And Costco, they're doing pretty well for themselves, right?
They are. And they have this amazing company culture.
Yeah.
So it clearly works.
It does. And it just goes to show you the power of servant leadership. And it really ties back to that idea of legacy that we were talking about earlier.
And when we talk about servant leadership, we can't forget about Martin Luther King Jr.
Absolutely.
Talk about a man who dedicated his entire life to serving others. He really embodies this law.
He did, and his legacy is just this powerful reminder that true leadership, it's about making a real difference in the world. And sometimes that means sacrifice, that means struggle, but it's always worth it.
Yes, and let's not forget about Mother Teresa.
Oh, absolutely not. Her unwavering dedication to serving those who are most vulnerable, it's just amazing.
It's truly inspiring. These leaders, they weren't motivated by money or fame or recognition.
Yeah.
They were driven by this deep desire to make the world a better place.
Yes, and they weren't afraid to get their hands dirty. They were right there on the front lines, serving alongside the people that they were leading.
Their stories are such a powerful reminder that leadership isn't about building monuments to ourselves. It's about lifting others up. It's about using our voices to amplify theirs and working together to create a more just and compassionate and equitable world.
So well said. And you know what? It all comes back to that idea of explosive growth. To really grow as a leader, you have to learn to lead followers. But to truly multiply your impact, you have to learn to lead leaders.
Yes, and that's what we've been talking about this whole time, really. It's about making that shift from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset, believing that there's enough room for all of us to lead, to shine, to make a difference. And it starts with that commitment to investing in each other, to mentoring and supporting each other's growth and celebrating each other's successes along the way. And you know what? I have to say, I see that same spirit, that same commitment to empowering others right here on your YouTube channel.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
The way you guys break down these big ideas, you share your insights, and you've created this incredible space for learning and growth. It's really amazing.
Well, thank you so much for saying that. That means the world to us. We're incredibly passionate about creating content that empowers our viewers to really step into their potential, to never stop learning, and to go out there and make a difference.
And it's clearly resonating. You've built this wonderful community of engaged viewers who are truly committed to learning and making a difference.
We're so grateful. We really are. And for anyone out there who's enjoying this deep dive, who's feeling inspired, we'd love for you to join our community.
Yes. Be sure to subscribe to Julie and John's YouTube channel for more awesome content just like this. We'll be sure to include a link in the show notes.
Absolutely. And remember, leadership, it's not about perfection. It's not about having all the answers. It's a journey. So be kind to yourself, embrace the journey, and never stop learning.
So well said. And on that note, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. We hope you feel inspired to go out there and lead with courage, with compassion, and with a deep commitment to making the world a better place. Until next time.